He paid just $8,500 for 40 acres of abandoned resort in the Montana wilderness. But what this desperate single father discovered buried beneath the rotting floorboards would turn his family's poverty into a $275 million secret that powerful people had killed to protect for over 20 years. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 in the morning, but Marcus Reed was already awake. He had been for an hour, staring at the water-stained ceiling of his rented duplex, counting cracks the way other men counted sheep. 34 years old, and he could map every imperfection in that ceiling by heart. The leak above the kitchen had spread another 2 inches since last month. He'd patched it 3 times, but Montana winters were brutal and cheap roofs only pretended to hold. He rolled out of bed, feet hitting the cold linoleum floor. The furnace was set to 62 degrees. Any warmer and the electric bill climbed above $200, money he simply didn't have. His breath misted slightly in the dim morning light as he pulled on his work jeans, the knees worn through, the hems frayed. His flannel shirt, faded blue and patched at the elbows, hung on the back of the chair where he'd left it the night before. In the next room, his daughters slept. Emma, 7 years old with her mother's dark curls, and Lily, 9, stubborn and too smart for her own good. They shared a twin bed pushed against the far wall, their small bodies curled together under a quilt his late wife Sarah had made before she got sick. Before everything fell apart, Marcus stood in their doorway for a moment, watching them breathe, the soft rise and fall of the blanket, Lily's arm thrown over Emma's shoulder. They looked peaceful. They looked safe. And that was all that mattered, even if it was barely enough. 3 years. It had been 3 years since Sarah's funeral. 3 years since cancer had taken her so fast they'd barely had time to say goodbye. 3 years of drowning in medical debt, of selling everything they owned, of watching his construction career collapse because he couldn't work full-time and care for 2 grieving children. 3 years of becoming a handyman who patched roofs and fixed toilets for $75 a job while the bills piled higher than he could breathe. He moved to the kitchen and started the coffee maker, the same one Sarah had bought at a thrift store 9 years ago. It sputtered and groaned, but it worked. Everything in this place just barely worked. The refrigerator hummed too loud. The stove's front burner didn't light anymore. The bathroom door stuck every time you closed it, but it was a roof, and it was theirs for now, as long as he could keep paying the $950 a month rent that climbed $50 higher every year. On the kitchen table sat 3 envelopes. He'd been avoiding them for a week. Red letters. Final notice. Past due. The electric company, the water company, the landlord. He opened the first one. $412 owed, or service would be disconnected in 10 days. He opened the second. $283, same threat, 7 days. He didn't open the third. He already knew what it said. Marcus poured his coffee into a chipped mug that read, "World's Best Dad," a Mother's Day gift from 3 years ago that felt like a lie. He sat down hard in the wooden chair and pressed his palms against his eyes. The math never worked. It didn't matter how many jobs he took, how many hours he stretched himself. There were only so many leaking faucets in a town of 4,000 people, and half of them couldn't pay anyway. He thought about Sarah. She used to sit across from him at this table, hands wrapped around her tea, telling him it would be okay, that they'd figure it out. That love was enough. But love hadn't paid for the chemotherapy. Love hadn't stopped the cancer, and love sure as hell wasn't paying the electric bill now. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister Rachel. "Can you pick up the girls after school today? I have a dentist appointment." She watched them most afternoons while he worked. He owed her more than he could ever repay. He texted back a simple yes and set the phone down. By 6:15, he was in his truck, a 2004 Ford F-150 with 193,000 miles on it and a passenger door that only opened from the outside. The engine turned over on the third try, coughing black smoke into the frozen morning air. He let it warm up, watching his breath fog the windshield, and tried to remember what hope felt like. His first job was at the Henderson place, replacing a section of rotted fence. The old man paid him in cash, 320s folded into his calloused palm with a nod. No receipt, no taxes, just survival. His second job was fixing a furnace for a widow on the east side. She gave him $40 and a container of leftover stew. He took both and thanked her like she'd handed him gold. By noon, he'd made $120. By 3, he was at the post office picking up a certified letter he'd been ignoring for 2 weeks. He knew what it was before he opened it. Eviction notice. 60 days to vacate or provide proof of payment for 3 months back rent. $2,850. Marcus sat in the truck, the letter shaking in his hands. 60 days. 2 months. Christmas was in 43 days. He looked at the envelope again, at the official stamp, at the cold, typed words that didn't care about 2 little girls who'd already lost their mother. He drove to Rachel's house to pick up Emma and Lily. They ran out the front door, backpacks bouncing, faces bright despite everything. Emma held up a drawing she'd made in art class, a house with a big yard and a swing set. "This is where we're gonna live someday," she said, grinning. "Right, Daddy?" Marcus's throat tightened. He forced a smile. "Yeah, baby. Someday." That night, after the girls had eaten spaghetti with butter for the 4th time that week, after they'd done homework at the kitchen table, after he'd read them 2 chapters of a library book about magical forests, after they'd finally fallen asleep tangled together in that too small bed, Marcus sat alone in the dark living room. He pulled out his wallet. Inside, folded carefully behind his driver's license, was $8,732 in cash. It was everything, his entire savings. Money he'd scraped together from side jobs, from selling Sarah's jewelry, from pawning his old tools. It was supposed to be for emergencies. For the day the truck finally died. For the day one of the girls got sick and needed a doctor. For the day everything fell apart completely. But wasn't this that day? He unfolded the newspaper he'd picked up at the post office, the classifieds section. He'd circled one ad in red ink 3 days ago and hadn't been able to stop thinking about it since. Public auction, mountain resort property, 40 acres, structures included, minimum bid $8,500, estate sale, as is, no warranties, viewing December 7th, auction December 9th, $8,500. It was almost everything he had. And for what? An abandoned resort nobody wanted. Property that had been sitting empty for over 20 years. It was insane. It was reckless. It was exactly the kind of gamble a desperate man made when he had nothing left to lose. But maybe, just maybe, it was also land, real land, 40 acres, and if the structures were salvageable, even barely, he could fix them up. He was a builder. He knew how to work with his hands. He could turn it into something, sell it for more, or hell, maybe even move his girls out there. Give them space. Give them a yard. Give them that house Emma had drawn with the swing set and the big windows. Or he could lose everything. Marcus stared at the ad until the words blurred. Then he picked up his phone and called the number listed. A man answered on the 4th ring, voice gruff and tired. "Yeah. Hi, I'm calling about the resort property auction. Viewings December 7th, 10 in the morning, up on Ridge Pass Road. You'll see the signs." "What kind of condition is it in?" The man laughed, sharp and bitter. "It's been empty since 1998. You do the math." "Why so cheap?" "Because nobody wants it. It's a teardown, 40 acres of trouble, but it's land and it's got water rights, and if you're stupid enough to bid, it's yours." Marcus should have hung up, should have folded the paper, put the cash back in his wallet, and kept his head down. But instead he said, "I'll be there." The man grunted. "Your funeral." The line went dead. December 7th came cold and brittle. Frost covered everything, turning the world into sharp edges and frozen breath. Marcus dropped the girls at Rachel's house before dawn, telling them he had a big job in the mountains. Lily looked at him with those two smart eyes. "You're not lying to us, are you, Daddy?" He kissed her forehead. "I'm trying to help us, sweetheart. That's all I'm ever trying to do." The drive up Ridge Pass Road took 90 minutes. The pavement gave way to gravel, then to dirt, then to something that barely qualified as a road at all. His truck bounced over ruts and rocks, the suspension groaning. The forest closed in on both sides, dense and dark, pine trees towering like sentinels. The higher he climbed, the thicker the snow became, clinging to branches and muffling sound. He almost missed the turnoff. A faded wooden sign, half covered in moss, read Mountain Crest Resort, with an arrow pointing left. He turned onto an even narrower path, weeds and saplings scraping the sides of his truck. The forest seemed to swallow him whole, and then the trees opened up. Marcus stopped the truck and stared. Before him stretched 40 acres of absolute abandonment. The main lodge sat in the center, a massive 3-story structure made of stone and timber. Its roof sagged in the middle. Windows gaped like empty eye sockets, shattered glass glittering in the weak sunlight. Vines crawled up the walls, thick as his arm, choking the stone. The wraparound porch had collapsed on one side, wooden beams rotting into the earth. Surrounding the lodge were smaller buildings, cabins maybe, 10 or 12 of them scattered across the property. Most had caved in completely, just piles of lumber overtaken by brush. A few still stood, leaning at dangerous angles, their doors hanging open, their interiors black with decay. The grounds were a jungle. What had once been manicured lawns and walking paths were now forests of weeds, wild shrubs, and trees that had grown unchecked for over 2 decades. A rusted playground sat near one of the collapsed cabins, swings hanging by a single chain, a slide buried under blackberry vines. 2 other trucks were parked near the lodge. 3 men stood talking, hands shoved in jacket pockets, breath clouding. One of them was the auctioneer, an older man in a brown suit that had seen better decades. The other 2 looked like local contractors, sizing up the property the way vultures sized up roadkill. Marcus parked and got out. The cold hit him immediately, sharper up here in the mountains. He zipped his jacket and walked over. The auctioneer nodded. "You here for the viewing?" "Yeah." "Sign in." He handed Marcus a clipboard. "And don't break your neck. I'm not liable for injuries." Marcus signed his name and looked at the other signatures. Just 4 people total had shown up to view the property. That told him everything he needed to know. This place was bad. "Feel free to walk around," the auctioneer said. "Auction starts day after tomorrow at noon. Cash or cashier's check only. Minimum bid is $8,500. If nobody bids, the estate'll probably just bulldoze it and sell the land." Marcus started with the lodge. The front steps were solid enough, stone that had weathered time better than wood. He tested each one before putting his weight down. The front door hung open, one hinge broken. He stepped inside. The smell hit him first, mold, rot, animal droppings, the thick scent of nature reclaiming what humans had abandoned. But beneath it, something else. Old wood polish, leather, smoke from a fireplace that hadn't burned in 20 years. The main room was enormous. Vaulted ceilings rose 20 feet high. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, big enough to stand inside. The floor was hardwood, buckled and warped, but still intact. A chandelier hung crooked from the ceiling, half its crystals missing, the rest coated in dust and cobwebs. Furniture remained. Couches, chairs, tables, all covered in grime and decay. Pictures still hung on the walls, their images faded and water-stained. A front desk sat near the entrance, its wood carved with intricate designs, a tarnished bell still sitting on top. Marcus walked slowly through the space, his boots echoing. This had been beautiful once, grand, The kind of place wealthy people came to escape the world. Stone walls, hand-carved banisters, arched doorways leading to other rooms. Even now, buried under years of neglect, he could see the craftsmanship. Someone had built this to last. He moved deeper into the lodge. The dining hall had tables for at least 50 people. The kitchen beyond was a disaster, appliances rusted through, cabinets hanging open, evidence of raccoons or worse. But the bones were there. Commercial stove, massive sinks, storage that went on forever. Upstairs he found 20 guest rooms. Most were destroyed, mattresses rotted, furniture collapsed. But the structure itself, the stone walls, the timber framing, it was all solid. Water damage? Yes. Mold? Absolutely. But the foundation hadn't shifted. The roof hadn't fully caved. This building was wounded, not dead. In one of the rooms, he found a maintenance log sitting on a desk, somehow preserved. He opened it carefully. The last entry was dated March 14, 1997. Replaced furnace filter, checked generator, all systems normal. The handwriting was neat, methodical, then nothing. 26 years of silence. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. What had happened here? Why had everyone just walked away? He continued exploring. Behind the lodge, he found what looked like a maintenance building. Inside, tools still hung on pegboards. A workbench sat covered in dust. And in the corner, something strange. A safe, built into the wall, vintage, heavy-duty, the kind you'd see in old banks. The door was closed, the combination lock intact. Why would a resort need a safe like that? He made his way back outside. The other men had left. The auctioneer was sitting in his truck, smoking a cigarette and reading a newspaper. Marcus walked the perimeter of the property. 40 acres was bigger than he'd imagined. The forest pressed in from all sides, but there was cleared land too, space for gardens, for renovations, for possibilities. Near the northern edge, he found something that stopped him cold. A helicopter pad, barely visible under years of overgrowth, and beyond it, cutting through the trees, what looked like a private airstrip, narrow and cracked but unmistakable. This hadn't been just a resort. This had been something else, something exclusive, something private. He walked back to the main lodge and stood in front of it, hands on his hips, looking up at the stone facade. $8,500. For 40 acres, a massive lodge, multiple structures, and a mystery he couldn't quite shake. He thought about Emma's drawing, the house with the big yard. He thought about the eviction notice. 60 days. He thought about Sarah, about what she'd say if she were here. She'd probably tell him he was crazy, but she'd also tell him to fight for their girls, to take the risk if it meant giving them a chance. Marcus pulled out his phone. No signal up here. He'd have to drive back down to call Rachel. But he already knew what he was going to do. December 9th arrived with snow, not the gentle kind, but the thick, aggressive Montana snow that buried roads and killed visibility. Marcus drove up Ridge Pass Road with his windshield wipers on full blast, his heart hammering in his chest. In his jacket pocket was a cashier's check for $8,500. Everything he had, everything he'd saved, everything that stood between his family and homelessness. The auctioneer's truck was already there. 2 other vehicles sat in the lot. Marcus parked and got out, snow immediately soaking into his jacket. The 3 men from the viewing were there, plus one new guy, younger, wearing an expensive coat that screamed he wasn't local. The auctioneer stood on the lodge steps, a megaphone in one hand, looking thoroughly miserable. "All right, let's get this over with. Mountain Crest Resort, 40 acres, structures as is. Minimum bid, $8,500. Water rights included. No warranties, no guarantees, no refunds. You bid, you buy. Anybody interested?" Silence. The wind howled through the pines. "Come on," the auctioneer said. "Somebody drove all the way up here. $8,500. Do I hear $8,500? One of the contractors raised his hand. 7,000. Minimum is 8,500. The man shrugged. Ain't worth 8,500. That lodge is a teardown. You're selling timber and land, nothing else. The auctioneer sighed. Fine, 7,000. Do I hear 7,000? Another contractor raised his hand. 6,000. And that's generous. Jesus Christ, the auctioneer muttered. Fine, 6,000, going once. 8,500. Everyone turned. Marcus stood with his hand raised, snow gathering on his shoulders. The auctioneer blinked. You serious? 8,500, Marcus repeated. The first contractor laughed. You're out of your mind. That place is a money pit. Then don't bid, Marcus said quietly. 8,500, the auctioneer called out. Do I hear 9,000? Silence. Going once, going twice. He banged a gavel against the porch railing. Sold, to the gentleman with more guts than sense. 30 minutes later, Marcus held a deed in his hands. His name was on it. Marcus James Reed, owner of 40 acres and everything standing on it. The auctioneer had him sign 15 different documents, took his check, and handed him a ring of keys that must have had 20 different ones on it. Good luck, the man said, not unkindly. You're gonna need it. The other bidders drove away, shaking their heads. Marcus stood alone in the snow, staring at his lodge, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not quite hope, not yet, but something close to it, something like possibility. He spent the rest of the day exploring with clear ownership in his mind. This wasn't just an abandoned building anymore. This was his. Every rotted board, every shattered window, every mystery hidden in its bones. He walked through room after room, making mental notes. The roof needed replacing. The windows needed boarding up before winter really hit. The plumbing was probably shot. The electrical was definitely a fire hazard. But the stone foundation was solid. The timber framing was good. The fireplaces worked. The well out back still had water when he tested it. This place could be saved. It would take time, materials, and every skill he had. But it could be saved. As the sun began to set, casting orange light through the broken windows, Marcus found himself in the basement. He hadn't ventured down here during the viewing. The stairs were stone, steep, leading into darkness. He clicked on his flashlight and descended carefully. The basement was massive, running the length of the entire lodge. Stone walls, concrete floor, storage rooms branching off in every direction. It was cold down here, colder than outside, and the air felt heavy. His breath misted in the flashlight beam as he walked. Most of the rooms were empty. Old furniture, broken equipment, nothing remarkable. But at the far end, in the deepest corner of the basement, he found something that made him stop. A steel door, industrial grade, set into the stone wall. It had 4 heavy-duty padlocks, each one different, each one rusted but intact, and above the door, painted in faded red letters, 2 words, Authorized Personnel Only. Marcus reached out and touched the cold metal. The door didn't budge. He tried the keys on his ring. None of them fit any of the padlocks. This door had been sealed separately, deliberately. He stepped back, his flashlight playing across the surface. There were scratches around the locks. Someone had tried to open this before, recently too. The scratches were silver, new metal showing through old rust. What the hell was behind this door? And why did someone go to so much trouble to keep it locked? Marcus stood in the darkness of that basement, snow falling outside, his daughters waiting at home, and a mystery sealed behind steel and rust. He had just spent his last dollar on 40 acres of ruins, but something told him, deep in his gut, that he'd bought more than just land. He'd bought a secret, and secrets, he was about to learn, always came with a price. Marcus didn't tell his daughters about the steel door. He didn't tell anyone. For the first week after buying the property, he kept it simple. Told Emma and Lily he'd bought some land up in the mountains, showed them pictures on his phone of the lodge, carefully angled to make it look more promising than terrifying. They asked if they could see it. He said soon. He said when it was safer. He said when Daddy fixed it up a little. The truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about that door. Every morning, he'd drop the girls at Rachel's before dawn, drive the 90 minutes up Ridge Pass Road, and work until the winter sun disappeared behind the mountains. He started with the basics: boarding up broken windows to keep animals out, clearing debris from the main rooms, testing the well water, which ran clear and cold, checking the structural integrity of the lodge, marking beams that needed replacing, walls that needed reinforcing. But every day, without fail, he'd end up in that basement, standing in front of the steel door, running his hands over the padlocks, trying different combinations, pulling, prying, studying every inch of metal for weakness. The door haunted him. Not just because it was locked, but because someone had wanted it locked. 4 separate padlocks, industrial grade, authorized personnel only. You didn't secure something like that unless what was inside mattered. On the 4th day, while clearing brush behind the lodge, Marcus found the first tunnel entrance. It was hidden under collapsed wood from an old shed, barely visible until he started hauling debris away. A concrete pipe, wide enough to walk through, descending into darkness. He clicked on his flashlight and looked down. The tunnel stretched at least 30 feet before turning. Roots had broken through in places, but the structure was intact. He marked it on his mental map and kept working. 2 hours later, he found another entrance, this one near the maintenance building, then another behind one of the collapsed cabins. By the end of the day, he'd found 5 separate tunnel entrances, all leading underground, all connected to something beneath the property. This wasn't just a resort, this was a compound. That night, sitting in his truck eating a gas station sandwich, Marcus pulled out his phone and searched for information on Mountain Crest Resort. There wasn't much. A few old newspaper articles from the 1980s and 90s, advertisements for a luxury wilderness retreat, celebrity sightings, rumors of exclusivity, and then nothing. The trail went cold in 1998. He dug deeper, found a microfiche archive from the county library website, an article from March 1998, local resort owner under federal investigation. The owner's name was listed as Vincent Arthur Holloway, real estate developer, millionaire. Known for privacy, eccentricity, and what the article called unconventional business practices. Marcus read further. Holloway had purchased the land in 1976, built the resort over 3 years, opened it in 1979 to immediate success. Politicians, actors, business executives, they all came to Mountain Crest. It was the place to be seen while pretending you wanted to disappear. But in 1997, things started falling apart. Federal investigators began looking into Holloway's finances. Questions about offshore accounts, whispers of fraud. By March 1998, the resort had closed abruptly. Staff let go without notice. Guests told to leave immediately. And Holloway himself vanished. Another article from June 1998. Missing developer's body found. Vincent Holloway had died in a single car accident on a remote Montana highway. Drove off a cliff in the middle of the night. No witnesses. The investigation concluded it was an accident. Bad weather, dangerous roads, a man under extreme stress. Marcus set his phone down. So Holloway had built this place, filled it with secrets, locked something away, and then died before anyone could find it. The question was, what? By the 2nd week, Marcus had stopped pretending he was just fixing up the lodge. He was hunting. Every free moment went into searching. He explored every tunnel, finding that they connected all the major buildings in a web of underground passages. He discovered a backup generator buried in a concrete bunker near the tree line, still functional, still humming with residual power. He found evidence of a sophisticated security system, cameras long dead, motion sensors corroded, but once state-of-the-art. This place had been designed for secrecy, for protection, for hiding something valuable, and it all led back to that steel door in the basement. On the 15th day, Marcus brought bolt cutters, heavy duty, the kind that could cut through chain-link fencing. He spent 3 hours in that basement, muscles screaming, sweat soaking through his shirt despite the cold, cutting through the first padlock. The metal resisted, sparking, shrieking, but finally it gave. The lock fell to the concrete floor with a heavy clang that echoed through the empty space. 3 more to go. He worked methodically. The second lock took 2 hours, the third another 3. His hands blistered, his shoulders burned, but he kept going because something in his gut told him this mattered. This was why the property sold for $8,500. This was why everyone else walked away. The fourth padlock fought him hardest. The bolt cutters slipped twice, nearly taking his thumb with them. He had to reposition, brace his feet, put his entire body weight into it. The metal groaned. His vision blurred. And then, finally, with a sound like a gunshot, the lock snapped. Marcus stepped back, breathing hard, staring at the door. All 4 padlocks lay on the ground. Nothing stood between him and whatever was behind that steel, except the door itself. He grabbed the handle. It was cold, so cold it burned his palm. He pulled. The door didn't budge. He pulled harder. Nothing. It was locked from the inside or rusted shut or both. He examined the edges, looking for weakness. The seal was airtight. Whoever installed this had done it right. Marcus went back upstairs, grabbed a crowbar from his truck, and returned. He wedged the bar into the doorframe and pulled with everything he had. The metal groaned. Something inside shifted. He repositioned, pulled again. A gap appeared, tiny, barely an inch. He shoved the crowbar in deeper and leaned back with his full weight. The door exploded open. Stale air rushed out, ice cold and dry, like opening a freezer that had been sealed for decades. Marcus stumbled back, coughing. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness beyond, revealing not another room, but a staircase. Concrete steps, steep and narrow, descending into absolute blackness. He stood at the threshold, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at him to call someone. The police, Rachel, anyone. But what would he say? I broke into a locked room in my own basement? I found stairs? He stepped through the doorway and started down. The stairs went deep. 30 steps, 40, 50. Marcus counted each one, his flashlight beam bouncing off concrete walls that pressed in from both sides. The air grew colder with every step. His breath came out in clouds. And then, finally, the stairs ended. He stepped into a space so large his flashlight couldn't find the far wall. He swept the beam left and right, trying to understand what he was seeing. The floor was polished concrete. The ceiling was reinforced with steel beams, and along the walls, rows and rows of metal storage units, cabinets, shelves, all organized with military precision. Marcus walked forward slowly. His footsteps echoed like thunder. He found a light switch on the wall and flipped it, not expecting anything. But somewhere deep in the bunker, a generator kicked on. Fluorescent lights flickered, hesitated, then blazed to life. Marcus had to shield his eyes. When they adjusted, what he saw made his knees go weak. The chamber was the size of a warehouse. Climate-controlled, the temperature gauge on the wall read 55 degrees. Backup power systems lined one wall, still running after over 20 years. And everywhere was wealth. The first thing he saw was the artwork, massive paintings in gilded frames stacked carefully against custom-built racks. He stepped closer, not daring to touch. The nameplate on the first one read, Monet, 1891, Water Lilies. The second, Picasso, 1937, Weeping Woman. A third, Rembrandt, 1642, The Night Watch. Marcus had never been to an art museum in his life, but even he recognized these names. These weren't prints. These were originals. Paintings worth millions, tens of millions, all stored underground like they were waiting for the world to end. He moved deeper into the chamber. Metal cabinets lined the walls, each one labeled. He opened the first. Inside were stacks of currency, old bills perfectly preserved. Not just American dollars, but foreign currency too. German marks, British pounds, Japanese yen, all from different eras. Some of the bills looked ancient, from before the wars, before modern banking. The next cabinet held coins, gold coins, silver coins, rare currency sealed in protective cases, each one labeled with dates, values, countries of origin. One case held a single gold coin dated 1795. The card beneath it read estimated value $275,000. One coin, worth more than Marcus had ever made in 5 years. He opened another cabinet. Gold bars, dozens of them, stacked like firewood, each one stamped with official seals, weight measurements, purity marks. He picked one up. It was heavier than he expected, dense, real. The label said 10 troy ounces. He set it down carefully, hands shaking. The next section of the chamber held something different. Wooden crates, sealed, labeled in languages he didn't understand. He pried one open carefully. Inside, packed in custom foam, were diamonds, uncut diamonds, rough stones the size of his thumbnail, dozens of them, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Marcus sat down hard on the concrete floor. His heart was racing so fast he thought he might pass out. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. People didn't just hide fortunes underground and forget about them. They didn't leave artwork worth more than small countries in abandoned resorts, but Vincent Holloway had. And now it was all sitting in Marcus Reed's basement. He stood on shaky legs and kept exploring. Filing cabinets in the back held documents, manila folders stuffed with paperwork. He pulled one out at random. Bank statements from offshore accounts, dates from the 1990s, balances in the millions. Another folder held property deeds, dozens of them, for land all over the world. Another held stocks, bonds, certificates, all made out to shell corporations with names that meant nothing. And at the very back, in a locked drawer he had to pry open, he found a leather journal. The cover was embossed with the initials VAH Vincent Arthur Holloway. Marcus opened it carefully. The first page was dated January 4th, 1997. They're coming for me. I can feel it. Federal investigators asking questions, auditing accounts, tracing money I spent years hiding. They think I'm a criminal. Maybe I am. But this fortune, everything in this vault, it's legitimate. Earned through real estate investments, risks that paid off. I hid it because I didn't trust the government. Didn't trust anyone. Now they want to seize it, claim I earned it illegally, punish me for being smarter than their regulators. Marcus flipped forward. February 3rd, 1997. Finished sealing the main vault. No one knows it exists except me. If they take everything above ground, fine. Let them have the resort, the cars, the visible assets. The real wealth stays hidden, stays mine. March 11th, 1997. Closed the resort today. Sent everyone home. If I'm going down alone. But they won't find this. No matter how hard they look, they won't find what's buried beneath their feet. The final entry was dated March 13th, 1997. I'm tired. So tired of running, of hiding, of looking over my shoulder. Maybe it's time to disappear for real. Maybe it's time to let it all go. Whoever finds this vault, if anyone ever does, it's yours. Use it better than I did. Build something that lasts. Don't let fear make you bury your life the way I buried mine. Marcus closed the journal, hands trembling. Holloway hadn't died by accident. He'd given up. Driven off that cliff because he couldn't handle the weight anymore. And he'd left everything behind, sealed in concrete and steel, waiting for someone brave enough or desperate enough to find it. Marcus looked around the chamber, at the paintings worth millions, at the gold bars stacked like lumber, at the diamonds gleaming in their cases, at the currency, The coins, the bonds, the documents proving ownership of assets scattered across the globe. He pulled out his phone. No signal down here, of course not. He was 50 feet underground in a concrete bunker. He opened the calculator app and started doing rough math. Conservative estimates, lowest possible values. Even then, even being careful, he was looking at $275 million. Maybe more, maybe significantly more. His daughters could go to college, any college. They could have the house Emma drew with the big yard and the swing set. They could have security, safety, futures that didn't involve eating pasta 4 nights a week and sharing a twin bed. They could have everything. Marcus sat down on the cold floor and cried. Not sad tears, not happy tears. Something else entirely. Relief, terror, disbelief, gratitude. Grief that Sarah wasn't here to see this. Anger that they'd suffered so much when this was sitting underground the whole time. Joy that maybe his daughters would never have to struggle the way he had. He cried until he had nothing left. Then he wiped his face, stood up, and started taking pictures. Documentation, proof, evidence that this was real. He spent 6 hours in that vault, photographing everything, making lists, trying to understand what he'd found. By the time he climbed back up those stairs, the sun had set. The basement was dark except for his flashlight beam. He closed the steel door behind him, wedged a 2x4 against it to keep it shut, and walked upstairs. Outside, snow was falling again, soft and quiet. He sat on the lodge steps, head in his hands, trying to process. Legally, this was his property. He'd bought it. He owned it. Everything on this land, above or below ground, belonged to him. But morally? Ethically? Did he have the right to a fortune someone else had earned and hidden? And more importantly, would anyone else try to claim it? His phone buzzed. Signal had returned now that he was above ground. A text from Rachel. Girls are asking when you're coming home. Lily says you're acting weird. Everything okay? Marcus typed back. Be there in 2 hours. Everything's fine. But everything wasn't fine. He'd just found a fortune that would change his life forever, and he had no idea what to do about it. He stood, brushed snow from his jeans, and walked to his truck. The drive down the mountain felt surreal. Every turn, every mile, he kept expecting to wake up, kept expecting this to be a dream. But it wasn't. The pictures on his phone proved it. The journal in his jacket pocket proved it. The keyring with 20 keys, one of which had unlocked a $275 million secret, proved it. By the time he pulled into Rachel's driveway, he'd made a decision. He wasn't going to tell anyone, not yet. Not until he figured out what this meant, what he was legally entitled to, what the risks were. He'd keep working the property, keep fixing the lodge, keep playing the role of struggling handyman trying to flip a bad investment. And he'd research, carefully, quietly. He'd find a lawyer, someone who specialized in estate law, property rights, found assets. He'd do this right, for his daughters, for Sarah's memory, for the future Holloway had accidentally given them. Emma and Lily ran out when they saw his truck, bundled in winter coats, faces bright. Daddy, Rachel made cookies. We saved you 3. Marcus scooped them both up, one in each arm, and held them tight. They smelled like chocolate chips and cinnamon. They felt solid, real, the only thing in his life that made sense. I love you both so much, he said, voice thick. Lily pulled back and looked at him, concerned. You okay, Daddy? You sound sad. He kissed her forehead. Not sad, baby, just grateful. That night, after tucking the girls into bed, after reading them 2 chapters about magical forests and brave adventurers, after they'd finally fallen asleep tangled in their too small bed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the journal open in front of him. He read every entry, learned about Holloway's life, his fears, his paranoia, his regrets. The man had been wealthy beyond measure, but died alone and terrified. He'd built a fortune but had no one to share it with. He'd hidden everything so well that it had stayed hidden for 26 years, untouched, forgotten, buried beneath a resort no one wanted. Until a desperate single father paid $8,500 for 40 acres of ruins and found a legacy waiting in the dark. Marcus closed the journal and looked at the eviction notice still sitting on the table. 60 days. Except now he had 275 million reasons to stop worrying about rent. He had options, he had leverage, he had hope, but he also had questions, legal questions, ethical questions, practical questions, and he needed answers before he could move forward. The next morning, after dropping the girls at school, Marcus drove to the county library. He spent 4 hours in the records room, pulling every document related to Mountain Crest Resort. Permits, tax records, ownership transfers. The property had been in legal limbo since Holloway's death. The estate had been tied up in federal court for years. Finally, in 2006, it was released for auction. Several auctions had failed. No one wanted it. Until Marcus. Which meant, legally, the property was his. But the vault? The assets inside? That was murkier. If they could be proven to be Holloway's personal property, and if there were no living heirs, then maybe they transferred with the land. Maybe. But if the federal government had a claim, if there were creditors, if someone came forward saying Holloway owed them money, it could all disappear into legal battles that lasted years. Marcus needed a lawyer, a good one. But lawyers asked questions, and questions led to attention, and attention was the last thing he wanted. He was still wrestling with this when he drove back up to the resort 2 days later. He'd decided to take it slow, secure the vault properly, document everything. Then, when he was ready, find the right legal help. But when he pulled into the clearing, his blood ran cold. Another truck was parked next to the lodge, a black F-250 with tinted windows. Someone was here. Marcus parked and got out slowly. His hand went to the crowbar under his seat. He grabbed it and approached the lodge carefully. The front door was open. Not broken, just open. Someone had walked right in. He stepped inside, crowbar ready. "Hello, this is private property." Footsteps from the back of the building, then a voice, male, calm. "I know, I've been watching it for 26 years. A man stepped into the main room. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and a weathered face. He wore a thick coat and work boots, and his hands were empty, non-threatening. But his eyes were sharp, knowing. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus demanded. The man studied him for a long moment. "My name's Derek Holloway. Vincent was my uncle." Marcus's grip tightened on the crowbar. "You're lying. The record said he had no family." "No immediate family," Derek corrected. "No kids, no siblings. But he had a nephew who worked for him, who knew his secrets, who's been waiting decades for someone to finally buy this place and do what he never could." "Which is what?" Derek's eyes drifted to the basement door. "Find what he hid, and decide whether the world deserves to know about it. What happens next will turn this discovery into a moral crisis, reveal a truth about hidden wealth, and force one desperate father to choose between safety and integrity. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more." Marcus didn't lower the crowbar. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Derek reached slowly into his jacket. Marcus tensed. But what the man pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a photograph. Old, faded, creased from years in a wallet. It showed 2 men standing in front of the Mountain Crest Lodge, younger, smiling. One of them was clearly Vincent Holloway. Marcus recognized him from the newspaper articles. The other was Derek, maybe 35, wearing a maintenance uniform. 1983, Derek said quietly. "I was his property manager, kept this place running for 15 years. I knew about the vault before he even finished building it." Marcus stared at the photo, then at Derek. "If you knew about it, why didn't you ever come get it?" Because it wasn't mine to take. Vincent made me promise, made me swear on everything I believed in that I'd let the property go through legal channels, that whoever bought it legitimately, whoever took the risk, they'd be the one to find it, if they were smart enough, if they were brave enough. You've been watching the property for 26 years? Derek nodded. Drove by every few months, made sure nobody broke in, kept squatters out, waited for the day someone would finally see what this place could be instead of what it looked like. Marcus's head spun. Why me? Why did you let me buy it? Because everyone else who looked at it only saw dollar signs. Contractors wanting to strip the timber, developers wanting to bulldoze it and build condos. You were the first person who walked through that lodge and saw possibility, who didn't run when you found the sealed door, who had enough determination to cut through 4 industrial padlocks instead of walking away. You knew I'd find it. I hoped you would. Derek stepped closer. Vincent was my uncle, but he was also a broken man. Paranoid, isolated, convinced the world was out to get him. He earned that fortune legally, through hard work and smart investments, but he hid it because he trusted no one, and it destroyed him. He died alone, afraid, with more wealth than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, and no one to leave it to. Derek's voice cracked slightly. I watched him waste away, watched him seal himself underground with his gold and his paintings and his fear. And when he drove off that cliff, part of me wondered if it was on purpose, if he'd finally decided the burden was too heavy. Marcus lowered the crowbar slightly. What do you want from me? Nothing, Derek said. I came to tell you the truth. That vault is legally yours now. The property transferred clean. There are no heirs, no federal claims that survived the statute of limitations. It's yours, all 275 million of it, give or take. Marcus felt dizzy. How do you know how much is down there? Because I helped him move it. Spent 3 years carrying gold bars, hanging paintings, organizing documents. I know every piece. I watched him build a legacy he was too afraid to enjoy. And now you have a choice. Which is, Derek met his eyes. Do you keep it hidden the way Vincent did? Take it slowly, quietly, never tell anyone. Live in fear someone will discover the truth. Or do you step into the light, claim it publicly, deal with the legal process, and use that fortune the way it was meant to be used, not as a secret, but as a resource? Marcus shook his head. If I go public, the government will take it. Taxes, investigations, they'll tear my life apart. Maybe, Derek acknowledged. Or maybe you'll find that doing things right, legally, protects you more than hiding ever could. Vincent hid his wealth and died terrified. You could claim yours and build something real. I have 2 daughters. I can't risk losing them in some legal battle. Then do it for them, Derek said simply. Show them their father was brave enough to stand in the truth, that he didn't let fear make him small. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to tell Derek he didn't understand, but something in the old man's face, the sadness, the regret, the weight of 26 years spent guarding a secret, made him stop. Vincent left a letter, Derek continued. It's in the vault, in his desk, back right corner. He wrote it the day before he died. I've never read it, but he told me it was for whoever found this place, for whoever had the courage to dig. With that, Derek handed Marcus the photograph, turned and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold. Whatever you decide, know that you've already done something Vincent never could. You opened the door. Now the question is, what will you build with what's on the other side? Then he was gone. Truck starting, tires crunching over snow, driving away down the mountain road. Marcus stood alone in the lodge, photograph in one hand, crowbar in the other, and the weight of $275 million pressing down on his shoulders like a physical thing. He looked toward the basement door. Vincent's final letter was waiting. Marcus waited until Derek's truck disappeared completely before he moved. The photograph felt heavy in his hand. 2 men, smiling, standing in front of a dream that would become a tomb. He tucked it into his jacket pocket and walked to the basement door. The steel door still stood open. The 2x4 he'd wedged against it knocked aside. Derek must have been down there, must have seen everything. And yet he'd walked away, leaving it all for Marcus to decide. The fluorescent light still hummed when Marcus descended the concrete stairs. The vault spread before him, unchanged, untouched, impossibly real in the cold, artificial light. He walked past the paintings, past the gold bars, past the diamonds gleaming in their cases, straight to the back right corner where Derek had said Vincent's desk waited. He found it behind a row of filing cabinets. A simple wooden desk, nothing fancy, scarred and worn like it had seen decades of use. On top sat a single envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with red wax that had cracked but held. Across the front, in careful handwriting, "To whoever finds this place." Marcus picked it up with trembling fingers. The paper felt fragile, like it might crumble if he held it too tight. He broke the seal carefully and pulled out 2 pages of handwritten text. The date at the top read March 13th, 1997. "If you're reading this, then I'm dead. Probably drove off a cliff somewhere, though I won't lie. Some days I consider just pointing the car into a tree and getting it over with. Depression does that. Makes you see endings everywhere. My name is Vincent Arthur Holloway. I'm 56 years old. I'm worth approximately $275 million. And I'm the loneliest man alive. I built this fortune through real estate, through investments that paid off, through risks others were too afraid to take. Every dollar was earned legally. I paid my taxes, followed the rules, did everything right, until the government decided I hadn't, until auditors started questioning every deal, until federal investigators began treating me like a criminal for being smarter than they were. So I hid it, all of it, brought it here to this vault I built beneath my resort. Sealed it away where they couldn't touch it, couldn't seize it, couldn't take what I'd spent my life building. I was going to wait them out, let them investigate, prove I'd done nothing wrong, then come back and reclaim what was mine. But something broke inside me during this process. The paranoia, the isolation, the constant fear. I stopped trusting anyone, stopped leaving the property, spent my days underground with my gold and my paintings, convinced the world was coming for me, and maybe it was. Or maybe I'd just lost my mind. The point is, I'm tired, so tired. And I realize now that I've wasted my entire life accumulating wealth I was too afraid to use. I never married, never had children, never built anything meaningful except this vault. My legacy is a hole in the ground filled with assets no one will ever see. So here's what I want you to know, whoever you are. If you found this place, if you cut through those locks and climbed down those stairs and stood in this vault, then it's yours. All of it. Legally, morally, completely yours. I'm leaving instructions with my nephew Derek to let the property sell through legitimate channels for almost nothing. Whoever buys it deserves it. Whoever has the courage to dig deserves what they find. But I'm begging you, please don't make my mistake. Don't let this wealth turn you into what I became. Don't hide, don't isolate, don't let fear consume you. Use this money, build something, help people. Create a legacy that isn't just metal and canvas stored underground. Prove that wealth can be a tool for good instead of a cage. If you have family, protect them. If you have dreams, pursue them. If you have a chance to stand in the light instead of hiding in the dark, take it. I wasted my life. Don't waste yours. Vincent Arthur Holloway, March 13, 1997. Marcus read the letter 3 times. Tears blurred his vision on the second reading. By the third, he had to sit down on the cold concrete floor, back against the desk, the pages resting in his lap. Vincent Holloway had been rich beyond measure and died alone. Marcus Reed was broke and had 2 daughters who loved him more than anything. The difference between them wasn't money, it was purpose. He folded the letter carefully and stood. The vault stretched around him, silent and waiting. $275 million worth of possibility. Enough to change his life. Enough to change his daughter's lives. Enough to help dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of people. If he was brave enough to step into the light. Marcus climbed the stairs, turned off the lights, and sealed the steel door behind him. He drove down the mountain with Vincent's letter in his pocket and a decision forming in his mind. He was going to do this right, legally, publicly, and whatever happened, happened. The first call he made was to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the best estate attorney in Montana, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd handled complicated inheritance cases for 30 years. Her office was in Billings, 3 hours away. He made an appointment for the following week, telling her secretary only that he'd found assets on property he'd recently purchased and needed guidance. The second thing he did was tell Rachel. He drove to her house after picking up the girls from school, sent them outside to play in the yard, sat Rachel down at her kitchen table and told her everything. The resort, the vault, the fortune, Vincent's letter, Derek's visit, all of it. Rachel listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, $275 million. Give or take. And you want to report it. I have to. If I don't, if I try to hide it, I'll become exactly what Vincent was. Paranoid, isolated, afraid. I can't do that to myself, can't do that to the girls. Rachel reached across the table and took his hand. Marcus, this is going to change everything. You know that, right? The moment this gets out, your life becomes a circus. Media, lawyers, people coming out of nowhere claiming they're owed something. It's going to be chaos. I know. And you're ready for that? He thought about Emma and Lily playing in the yard, about the eviction notice still sitting on his table, about working 70-hour weeks for barely enough to survive, about Sarah, who died because they couldn't afford better treatment, better doctors, better options. No, he said honestly, but I'm doing it anyway. Rachel squeezed his hand. Then I'm with you, whatever you need. The meeting with Patricia Chen happened on a Tuesday. Marcus drove to Billings alone, leaving the girls with Rachel, carrying a folder full of photographs and documents. The lawyer's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. Patricia herself was in her 60s, silver hair pulled back, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's truck. She listened to his story without expression, looked through his photographs, read Vincent's letter, examined the deed to the property. Then she sat back in her leather chair and said, Mr. Reed, you've just walked into the most complicated legal situation I've seen in 20 years. Marcus's stomach dropped. Complicated how? Well, the good news is the property is unquestionably yours. You bought it at a legitimate auction. Title transferred clean. Everything on that land above or below ground is legally your property under Montana law. And the bad news? The bad news is that $275 million attracts attention. The moment you report this, you're going to face scrutiny from every direction. The IRS will want their cut. State taxes will take another slice. Creditors might come forward claiming Vincent owed them money. Distant relatives might appear claiming inheritance rights. And if any of those assets were obtained illegally, even if Vincent didn't know it, they could be subject to seizure. Marcus felt sick. So I could lose everything. Possibly. Or you could end up keeping 70–80% after taxes and legal fees. It depends on dozens of factors we won't know until we start the process. She leaned forward. But here's what I can tell you. If you try to hide this, if you start selling assets quietly without reporting them, you will eventually get caught. And when you do, you'll lose everything and possibly face criminal charges. The only way forward is complete transparency. What do I do? Patricia pulled out a legal pad and started writing. First, we file a claim with the court establishing your ownership. Second, we hire forensic accountants to value and authenticate every asset in that vault. Third, we notify the IRS and state tax authorities. Fourth, we publish legal notice giving any potential claimants 90 days to come forward. And fifth, we prepare for a battle. How long does this take? Best case, 18 months. Worst case, 5 years. Marcus closed his eyes. 5 years of legal limbo, 5 years of uncertainty, 5 years of his daughters asking questions he couldn't fully answer. What's my other option? He asked quietly. Patricia looked at him steadily. You don't have one, not if you want to sleep at night. He signed the retainer agreement that afternoon. $20,000 he didn't have, charged to a credit card he'd only kept for emergencies. Patricia said she'd file the initial paperwork within the week. After that, things would move quickly. One more thing, she said as he stood to leave. Prepare yourself. The moment this becomes public record, your life changes. Reporters will camp outside your house. Strangers will call claiming they're long-lost cousins. People you haven't spoken to in years will suddenly be your best friend. You need to decide now how you're going to protect your family. Marcus thought about Emma and Lily. What do you suggest? Don't talk to anyone except through me. Don't confirm or deny anything. And get security for that property. Once word gets out about what's in that vault, someone will try to steal it. He drove home in silence, Patricia's words echoing in his head. By the time he reached the duplex, evening had fallen. The girls were doing homework at the kitchen table. Rachel had made dinner. Spaghetti again, but nobody complained. Lily looked up when he walked in. Daddy, are we rich now? Marcus froze. What? Aunt Rachel said you found something valuable at the mountain house. Does that mean we're rich? He looked at Rachel, who gave him an apologetic shrug. He'd told her she could explain it to the girls in simple terms. Apparently she had. Marcus knelt down beside Lily's chair. I found something that might help us, yeah, but it's complicated, sweetie. It's going to take a long time to figure out. But we can get a bigger house? Emma asked hopefully. With our own rooms? His heart cracked. Maybe. I hope so. But right now we have to be patient. We're good at patient, Lily said seriously. We've been patient our whole lives. Marcus pulled them both into a hug, holding tight, fighting the lump in his throat. These girls, his girls, they deserved everything, and he was going to make sure they got it. The first news story broke 3 days later. Small article in the local paper. Local man discovers significant assets on recently purchased property. It didn't mention the amount, didn't mention Vincent Holloway, but it was enough. By the next morning, Marcus's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters from Billings, a producer from a true crime podcast, 2 different treasure-hunting reality shows. He ignored them all, following Patricia's advice, but they kept calling. Then people started showing up at the resort. Marcus drove up one morning to find 4 cars parked in the clearing. Strangers walking the property, taking pictures, pointing at buildings. One man was trying to break into the maintenance shed. Hey, Marcus yelled. This is private property. The man turned, phone in hand, filming. Is it true you found millions of dollars? Can we see the vault? Get off my land before I call the sheriff. They left, but others came. Every day, more people. Curiosity seekers, wannabe treasure hunters, a woman claiming to be Vincent's second cousin, a man insisting he'd loaned Vincent money in 1995 and wanted it back. Patricia filed for a restraining order, establishing a perimeter around the property. Marcus hired a security company to patrol during the day. It cost $800 a week he couldn't afford, but the alternative was watching strangers crawl all over his land. The stress started showing. Marcus stopped sleeping more than 3 or 4 hours a night. He lost weight, snapped at the girls over nothing, then hated himself for it. Rachel watched him with worried eyes. You need to slow down, she said one evening. You're burning out. I'm fine. You're not fine. You look like hell. The girls are scared. They think you're going to disappear like their mother did. That stopped him cold. They said that? Lily did. Said you're acting like Mummy did before she got really sick. Distant, distracted, like you're already gone. Marcus sat down hard. He'd been so focused on protecting the fortune, on managing the legal process, on keeping strangers away, that he'd forgotten what actually mattered. Not the money, not the vault, his daughters. That night, he took Emma and Lily to their favorite place, the library. Let them pick out armfuls of books. Bought them hot chocolate from the coffee shop next door, even though he couldn't afford it. Sat with them on the library steps while they told him about school, about friends, about a stray cat they'd been feeding behind Rachel's house. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I've been distracted, working too much, thinking too much about grown-up stuff." "Is it because of the money?" Lily asked. "Partly. Finding it should be a good thing, but it's complicated." "Grown-ups always say that," Emma said. "Complicated. But it's not. If the money's yours, keep it. If it's not, give it back. Easy." Marcus smiled. "You're right. It should be that simple." "Aunt Rachel says money changes people," Lily added. "Says it makes them mean. Are you going to be mean, Daddy?" "No, baby, I promise. No amount of money could ever make me different from who I am." But even as he said it, he wondered if it was true. The break-in happened 2 weeks later. Marcus got a call from the security company at 2 a.m. Motion sensors triggered. Someone on the property. He told them to call the sheriff and raced up the mountain, his heart in his throat. He arrived to find 2 sheriff's vehicles parked outside the lodge, lights flashing. Deputies inside, flashlights sweeping, and in the basement, the steel door hung open. Someone had tried to cut through it with a torch. Failed, but damaged it enough that it wouldn't seal properly anymore. "They didn't get into the vault," one deputy said. "Door held, but they were working on it when we arrived. 2 men ran into the woods. We've got units searching." Marcus stared at the scarred metal, at the burn marks, at the evidence that someone had tried to steal what was his. Rage flooded through him, hot and primal. "We'll post a unit here tonight," the deputy continued. "But Mr. Reed, you need better security. Cameras, reinforced locks, maybe a live-in guard. Word's out about what's down there. People are going to keep trying." Marcus nodded numbly. More expenses, more complications, more chaos. By the time he got home, dawn was breaking. The girls were still asleep. Rachel had stayed over, was making coffee in the kitchen when he walked in. "They tried to rob it," he said flatly. "Jesus, did they get anything?" "No, but they will eventually. I can't guard it 24/7. Can't afford to hire enough security to really protect it. Can't even get a proper safe installed without spending a fortune I don't have yet." Rachel handed him coffee. "So what are you going to do?" Marcus sank into a chair. "I don't know. Patricia says the legal process could take years. Until then, I'm just holding on to this fortune I can't access, can't protect, can't use, and it's tearing my life apart." "Maybe that's the answer." "What?" "Maybe you're thinking about this wrong. You're trying to protect the money. What if instead you focused on protecting your family? Move the girls somewhere safe. Rent a place outside town where reporters can't find you. Let Patricia handle the legal stuff. Let security handle the property. You just be their dad." Marcus looked at her. "That costs money I don't have." "Then borrow it. Patricia said you'll eventually get most of the fortune. Use that as collateral. Get a loan. Get safe. Get stable. Then deal with everything else." It was the first thing that had made sense in weeks. By the end of the month, Marcus had moved the girls to a rental house in a town 90 minutes away. Small place, 3 bedrooms, nothing fancy. But it was quiet, anonymous. No reporters knew where they were. He'd taken out a loan against his expected settlement, enough to cover rent, security for the resort, and Patricia's legal fees. The vault itself had been professionally secured. Steel reinforcements, cameras, motion sensors, a security company with armed guards rotating 24/7. It cost a fortune, but it was necessary. And slowly, painfully, the legal process ground forward. Accountants valued the assets. The IRS filed their claims. Potential creditors were notified, distant relatives came forward, were investigated, were found to have no legal standing. Newspapers ran stories, cable news picked it up. Single father discovers fortune became a feel-good headline for exactly one news cycle before harder questions started. Where did Holloway get the money? Was any of it illegal? Does Reed deserve to keep it? What about taxes? What about oversight? Marcus stopped reading the articles, stopped watching the news, focused on what mattered. Emma's soccer games, Lily's school play, family dinners where they actually talked and laughed. Rachel came by twice a week, brought groceries, helped with homework, reminded him he wasn't alone. And through it all, Marcus kept Vincent's letter in his jacket pocket, read it whenever doubt crept in, whenever the pressure felt too heavy, whenever he wondered if he should have just walked away. Don't let this wealth turn you into what I became. Don't hide. Don't isolate. Don't let fear consume you. 6 months after finding the vault, Marcus stood in Patricia's office again. She laid out papers across her desk, her expression cautiously optimistic. "The court has ruled in your favor," she said. "All assets transfer to you legally, no creditors with valid claims, no heirs with standing. The property and everything in it is yours." Marcus couldn't speak. "After federal taxes, state taxes, and legal fees, you're looking at approximately $193 million, give or take. $193 million. More money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Enough to secure his daughter's futures. Enough to build something meaningful. Enough to prove Vincent hadn't wasted his life creating this fortune. "There's one more thing," Patricia said. "Several charities have reached out. Foundations, non-profits. They've heard about your situation. They're asking if you'd consider donating some of the fortune to causes Vincent cared about." "What causes?" According to Derek Holloway, Vincent was passionate about mental health research, struggled with depression his whole life, never sought treatment because of stigma. Several organizations are asking if you'd honor that. Marcus thought about Vincent's letter, about a man so wealthy and so broken, about depression that led to isolation that led to a cliff in the darkness. "Yes," Marcus said. "Absolutely yes." Patricia smiled. "I'll set up meetings." That night, Marcus gathered his daughters in their small rental house, sat them down on the couch, one on each side, told them what had happened, that the money was officially theirs, that their lives were going to change, that they could have the house with the big yard and the swing set, but also that money couldn't fix everything, that it wouldn't bring their mother back, that they still had to be kind, grateful, and aware that most people would never have what they had. "So we have to use it good?" Emma asked. "We have to use it well," Marcus corrected gently. "And yes, we have to build something that matters." Lily looked at him seriously. "What would Mommy want us to build?" Marcus's eyes filled. "Something that helps people who are hurting, who are scared, who need hope." "Then that's what we'll do," Lily said simply. And in that moment, sitting with his daughters in a rented house, with $193 million to his name and Vincent Holloway's legacy resting on his shoulders, Marcus Reed finally understood what he'd really found in that vault. Not money, not gold, not paintings worth millions. He'd found purpose, and now came the hard part, deciding what to build with it. The news vans arrived at the courthouse 3 days before the final hearing. 5 of them. Satellite dishes pointed at the sky, reporters doing stand-ups on the courthouse steps. "Single father's fortune finally settled," was the headline scrolling across every local station. National outlets picked it up too. CNN, Fox, even a segment on Good Morning America. Marcus watched from Patricia's office across the street, coffee going cold in his hands. Emma and Lily were with Rachel, safe at the rental house, watching cartoons and eating cereal like this was just another Thursday. They didn't understand that today their lives would officially change forever. "You ready?" Patricia asked, adjusting her suit jacket. Marcus set down the coffee. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice, but backing out now would be catastrophic. He stood, straightened his tie, the only one he owned, bought at Goodwill 3 years ago for Sarah's funeral. Wore it to her service. Wore it to job interviews that went nowhere. And now he was wearing it to claim $193 million. The walk across the street felt like a mile. Cameras turned toward him immediately. Flashes, voices shouting questions, microphones shoved in his face. Mr. Reed, how does it feel to be a multi-millionaire? Are you worried about people coming after your money? What are you going to do with the fortune? Patricia guided him through the crowd, her hand firm on his elbow. 2 courthouse security guards cleared a path. Marcus kept his head down, said nothing, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Inside was quieter. Marble floors, high ceilings, the kind of building designed to make you feel small. They took an elevator to the 3rd floor. Courtroom 7, Judge Margaret Williamson presiding. The room was packed. Reporters in the back rows, curiosity seekers, a few lawyers representing various interests, and in the front row on the left, Derek Holloway, silver hair combed back, wearing a suit Marcus had never seen him in. Their eyes met. Derek nodded once, encouraging. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Williamson entered. She was in her 70s, grey hair, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She'd presided over the entire case, ruled on every motion, heard every argument. Patricia said she was fair, thorough, and didn't suffer fools. Be seated, the judge said. We're here for final disposition in the matter of the estate of Vincent Arthur Holloway and the claims of Marcus James Reed. Counselor, is there anything further before I rule? Patricia stood. No, Your Honor, we rest on our submitted briefs. Very well. Judge Williamson opened a thick folder. I've reviewed all evidence, testimony, and documentation submitted over the past 6 months. This has been one of the most unusual cases to cross my bench. Marcus's heart hammered. The facts are as follows. Mr. Reed purchased property at a legitimate public auction. The property transferred with clear title. He discovered assets on that property in a sealed underground vault that had belonged to the previous owner, Vincent Holloway. Mr. Holloway died intestate with no surviving heirs. His estate was settled years ago. The property itself was subsequently sold at auction, which Mr. Reed won. She looked up. The question before this court is whether the assets in the vault transfer with the property or should be treated separately. Silence. Nobody breathed. After careful consideration, I find that under Montana property law, all assets, structures, and fixtures on land transfer with the deed, unless explicitly exempted. The vault was built into the property. Its contents were fixtures of that construction. Mr. Holloway left no will specifying otherwise. Therefore, I rule that all assets discovered in said vault are the legal property of Marcus James Reed. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Marcus felt light-headed. However, the judge continued, Mr. Reed is responsible for all applicable taxes on the fair market value of said assets. The IRS has filed claims. The state of Montana has filed claims. After those obligations are met, the remainder belongs to Mr. Reed, free and clear. She banged her gavel. This matter is concluded. Patricia squeezed Marcus's shoulder. We won. But Marcus didn't feel like he'd won anything. He felt like he'd stepped into a spotlight that would never turn off. Outside the courthouse, the cameras were worse. Someone had leaked the final amount. Reporters shouted numbers. 193 million. Enough to buy a private island. Enough to never work again. Enough to turn a poor handyman into one of the wealthiest men in Montana. Marcus made it to Patricia's car, locked the doors, and sat in silence while she drove. They went to her office, signed more papers, transferring assets, opening accounts, setting up trusts for the girls. The numbers were so large they stopped meaning anything. This is yours now, Patricia said, sliding a bank statement across her desk. $193,412,608, minus my final fees, which we'll settle next week. Marcus stared at the paper, more zeros than he'd ever seen in his life. So what now? He asked quietly. Now you decide who you're going to be, the man who spends it all on himself, or the man who builds something that matters? Marcus thought about Vincent's letter, about Sarah, about Emma and Lily eating pasta 4 nights a week, because that's all he could afford. I already know who I am, he said. Question is whether I'm strong enough to prove it. The first thing Marcus did was pay off every debt he had. Credit cards, medical bills from Sarah's final months, back rent on the duplex he'd been evicted from, even returned the loan he'd taken out to cover legal fees, zeroed everything, started from scratch. The second thing he did was buy a house, not a mansion, not some ridiculous estate, just a regular 4-bedroom house in a good school district with a fenced yard and a tire swing hanging from an oak tree. $350,000. The realtor kept trying to show him million-dollar properties. He kept saying no. This was enough. This was home. Emma and Lily cried when they saw their own bedrooms for the first time. Actual beds, actual space, actual windows that looked out on actual grass. Lily hugged him so hard she knocked the wind out of him. Emma just stood in her room, touching the walls like she couldn't believe they were real. "This is ours?" she whispered. "Nobody can take it away?" "Nobody," Marcus promised. "This is ours forever." That first night in the new house, Marcus couldn't sleep. He walked through the rooms in darkness, running his hands along walls that belonged to them. Stood in the girls' doorways, watching them breathe. They'd fallen asleep immediately, exhausted from excitement, sprawled across beds that were theirs alone for the first time in their lives. He went to the kitchen, poured water from a tap that didn't leak, stood at a window that actually closed properly, looked out at a yard with grass instead of weeds, and felt something break open inside his chest. Not grief, not joy, something else. Relief so profound it made his knees weak. They were safe. Finally. Completely safe. He slid down to the floor, back against the cabinets, and let himself cry. Quiet tears that soaked into his shirt collar. For Sarah, who should have been here. For the years of struggle. For pasta dinners and eviction notices and choosing between gas and groceries. For every moment he'd felt like he was failing his daughters. It was over. That chapter was closed. The third thing he did was call Derek. They met at a diner halfway between Marcus's new house and Derek's cabin in the mountains, ordered coffee, sat across from each other in a booth with cracked vinyl seats. "I want to do something with the resort," Marcus said. "Something that honors your uncle, something that helps people instead of just rotting in the woods." Derek's eyes softened. "What did you have in mind?" "A recovery center, residential treatment for addiction, mental health, trauma, the kind of place that takes people who have nowhere else to go and gives them a chance to heal. Completely funded. No one turned away because they can't pay." Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Vincent would have loved that. He struggled with depression his whole life, never got help, was too proud, too scared of what people would think. If he'd had a place like that, maybe things would have been different. I want to call it the Holloway Center." "He'd hate that," Derek said with a small smile. "Always hated attention, but yeah, do it anyway. He doesn't get a vote anymore. I need someone to run it, someone who understands the property, the history, the mission, someone I trust." Derek looked at him. "You offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a purpose, same thing Vincent accidentally gave me." Derek's hand shook as he picked up his coffee. "I spent 26 years guarding a secret. Maybe it's time I helped build something instead." They shook hands across the table. Partners in resurrection. The fourth thing Marcus did was establish the Sarah Reed Memorial Scholarship Fund. Full rides to college for students who'd lost a parent. Kids who understood grief, who knew what it meant to keep going when the world fell apart. 50 scholarships a year, renewable, no strings attached. He endowed it with $20 million. At the press conference announcing it, with Emma and Lily standing beside him in matching dresses Rachel had bought, Marcus's voice broke when he said Sarah's name. But he pushed through. Told reporters about the woman he'd loved, about the mother his daughters barely remembered, about how medical debt had destroyed them and how he wanted to make sure other families didn't suffer the same way. The cameras loved it. The headlines were gentle this time. Grieving father honors late wife with scholarship fund. For once, the story wasn't about the money, it was about the love. But that night, after the press conference, after the cameras had gone and the reporters had left, Emma asked a question that gutted him. "Daddy, will we forget Mommy now that we have money?" Marcus stopped mid-step, turned to look at his daughter. She stood in the doorway of her new bedroom, small and serious, her mother's dark curls falling around her face. "What?" he managed. "Lily says rich people don't remember things like we do. Says they get too busy with their fancy stuff. I don't want to forget Mummy's voice, or how she smelled, or the songs she used to sing." Marcus crossed the room and knelt in front of her. "Emma, look at me. We will never forget your mother, never. That scholarship fund, I created it so thousands of people will know her name, so her life matters beyond just us. Money doesn't erase memory, baby. If anything, it gives us the chance to honor it better." "Promise?" "I promise. And you know what? Tomorrow we're going to go through all the boxes of Mummy's things we kept in storage. Photos, letters, her clothes. We're going to fill this house with her, make her part of every room, okay?" Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. Marcus held her until she stopped shaking. Later, he found Lily in her room, pretending to read but obviously listening. He sat on the edge of her bed. "You worried too?" he asked gently. Lily set down her book. "I remember Mummy getting sick. Remember how you changed, got quiet, got sad. And now you're getting different again. Not sad, but distant. Like you're thinking about a million things all at once, and none of them are us." Marcus's throat tightened. "I'm sorry. I've been overwhelmed, but you're right. I've been so focused on managing the money, on making sure we do right by it, that I forgot what actually matters. Which is, you and Emma, us, this family, Sarah's memory. Money is just a tool. You two are my life." Lily studied him with those two old eyes. "Then prove it. Don't just say it. Show us you're still our dad and not some rich guy who used to be our dad." The words hit like a punch. "You're right," he said quietly, "and I will." The fifth thing he did surprised even himself. He started paying off medical debt for families in Montana. Not just a few, thousands of them. Worked with hospitals to identify people drowning in bills from cancer treatment, car accidents, emergency surgeries, and just erased the debt. 2 million here, 5 million there. Anonymous donations that showed up with a simple note, "Paid in full, build your future." He'd never see their faces, never hear their thanks, and that was fine. He didn't need gratitude. He needed to know he was using this fortune the way Vincent had wanted. To help, to heal, to prove money could be a tool instead of a curse. But he also made changes at home. Started having dinner with the girls every single night, no exceptions. Turned off his phone, focused on homework and stories and the small details of their lives. Coached Lily's soccer team even though he knew nothing about soccer. Attended every one of Emma's art shows, even the small ones at school. And slowly, the distance Lily had noticed began to close. The transformation of Mountain Crest Resort began that fall. Marcus hired a construction company out of Billings. They brought in engineers, architects, contractors, gutted the interior of the lodge while preserving the stone walls and timber framing, installed new electrical, new plumbing, built out 20 private rooms for residents, added group therapy spaces, a commercial kitchen, a medical wing. The smaller cabins were demolished, too far gone to save. In their place rose new structures, staff housing, a gymnasium, an art therapy building. gardens where residents could work the soil and grow vegetables. Derek oversaw it all. Walked the property every day with blueprints in hand, making sure every detail honored what the place had been while transforming it into what it needed to become. Marcus joined him most weekends, bringing the girls. They'd explore the grounds, now clear and maintained, feed the deer that wandered down from the forest, talk about the future. "How many people will it help?" Lily asked one afternoon, standing on the lodge steps. "Maybe 30 at a time," Marcus said, "but over years, decades, thousands." "That's good," she decided. "Mummy would like that." Emma was quieter. But one day, while walking through the gardens with Marcus, she said, "Daddy, are we different now? Because we're rich." Marcus stopped, knelt down. "Are you different?" She thought about it. "I don't feel different. I just feel like me, but with a nicer bedroom." "Then no," he said. "We're not different. We just have more tools, and tools are only as good as what you build with them." But the reality of wealth was more complicated than Marcus had anticipated. 3 months after moving into the new house, he received a threatening letter. Someone claiming they deserved a share of the fortune, saying they'd known Vincent, saying they had proof of a verbal agreement, saying they'd sue if Marcus didn't pay them $5 million. Patricia reviewed it and declared it nonsense. Extortion attempt, ignore it. But 2 weeks later, someone broke into Marcus's truck, took nothing, just left a note on the dashboard. "Pay up, or your girls learn what it's like to be poor again." Marcus called the police, filed a report, increased security at the house, started having someone walk the girls to and from school. And for the first time since finding the vault, he felt real fear. Not of losing the money, of losing his daughters. He sat in Patricia's office, hands shaking. This is what Vincent was afraid of. This is why he hid everything. Because wealth makes you a target. "Yes," Patricia said bluntly, "but hiding didn't save Vincent. He died alone and terrified. You have a choice. You can let fear win, or you can stand your ground and trust that doing things legally, properly, will protect you. And if it doesn't, then we fight. But Marcus, you've already won the hard part. The money is legally yours. You've reported everything. You're paying your taxes. You're using it for good. Anyone who comes after you now is just a bully, and bullies back down when you don't flinch." She was right. The extortionist never made another move. The police traced the letter to a man in California with a history of scam attempts. He was arrested. The threat vanished. But the experience changed Marcus, made him more cautious, more aware of how exposed wealth made him. He hired a security consultant, installed cameras, taught the girls about strangers and safety, hated that he had to. One night, Lily found him sitting on the back porch, staring into the dark yard. "You okay, Daddy?" He pulled her into his lap even though she was getting too big for it. "Just thinking. About bad guys. About keeping you safe." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mommy used to tell me that we can't control what scary things are out there. We can only control how we respond. She said fear is natural, but hiding from life isn't living." Marcus's eyes stung. "When did she tell you that?" "When she was sick. When I was scared she was going to die. She said even if she did, we had to keep living. Had to keep being brave." Marcus held his daughter tighter. Sarah's wisdom, carried forward by a 9-year-old who understood more than she should have to. "You're right," he whispered. "We keep living. We keep being brave." By spring, the Holloway Center opened quietly. No grand ceremony, no ribbon cutting. Just 30 residents, most court-mandated for drug treatment, a few there voluntarily for mental health support, all of them broken in different ways. And slowly, with therapy and structure and compassion, some of them began to heal. Marcus visited once a month, never announced himself, just showed up and walked the grounds, talked to residents if they approached him, mostly listened, heard their stories, their struggles, their hopes. One man, maybe 40, sober for 90 days, stopped him near the garden. You're the guy who paid for this place, right? I helped build it, Marcus said carefully. I was living under a bridge 6 months ago, thought I was going to die there. Now I got a bed, got food, got people who give a damn if I wake up tomorrow. The man's eyes filled. I don't know how to thank you for that. You already did, Marcus said. By showing up, by trying. That's all anyone can ask. The man nodded and walked away. Marcus stood in the garden, surrounded by new growth, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not since before Sarah got sick. Peace. But the attention didn't stop. Being worth $193 million made Marcus a target. Reporters still called. Investment advisors showed up unannounced. Distant relatives he'd never heard of reached out with sob stories and requests for money. Old friends from high school suddenly wanted to reconnect. Most of it he ignored, screened his calls, kept his address unlisted, installed security at the house, taught the girls never to tell strangers where they lived or talk about money at school. But some people wouldn't take no for an answer. One man showed up at the girls' elementary school claiming to be Marcus's cousin, trying to pick up Lily from class. The school called the police. Marcus got a restraining order, started driving the girls to school himself every day, watching for anything suspicious. This is what wealth costs, Patricia warned him. Your privacy, your peace, the ability to move through the world normally. I know, Marcus said, but the alternative was staying poor and broken, and that cost me more. A year after finding the vault, Marcus stood on the steps of the Holloway Center at a private ceremony. The building was full. Residents, staff, board members, local officials. Derek stood beside him, now officially the executive director, wearing a suit he still looked uncomfortable in. Marcus approached the microphone. He'd written a speech, practiced it, but when he looked out at the faces, he set his notes aside and spoke from his heart. A year ago, I was a single father working 70 hours a week to keep the lights on. I was behind on rent. My truck was falling apart. My daughters were eating pasta 4 nights a week because that's all I could afford. And I was terrified. Terrified I was failing them. Terrified I'd never give them the life their mother wanted for them. He paused. Emma and Lily sat in the front row with Rachel, watching him with serious faces. Then I bought a piece of property nobody wanted, an abandoned resort in the mountains. I paid $8,500, which was everything I had, and I found something that changed my life. Not just money, though there was money, but purpose. He looked at Derek. Vincent Holloway spent his life accumulating wealth he was too afraid to use. He died alone and terrified, convinced the world was against him. He left behind a fortune and a warning. Don't make my mistakes. Marcus's voice strengthened. This center exists because Vincent Holloway earned a fortune and hid it, because his nephew Derek guarded that secret for 26 years, because I was desperate enough to bid on a property everyone else ignored, and because we all decided that wealth means nothing if it doesn't help people. He gestured to the building behind him. This place will help thousands, but more than that, it proves something. That money doesn't have to corrupt. That wealth can heal instead of harm. That one person's tragedy can become another person's salvation. The room was silent. My daughters ask me sometimes if we're different now, if being rich changed who we are. And I tell them no, we're the same people. We just have more tools, more ability to help, more responsibility to do right by others. He looked at Emma and Lily again. They were both crying. So was Rachel. So was Derek. Hell, so was Marcus. Vincent Holloway's life ended on a dark road in the mountains, but his legacy lives here, in every person who walks through these doors, in every family freed from medical debt, in every scholarship student who gets to go to college, in every second chance we give because someone once gave us one. He stepped back from the microphone. The room erupted in applause. But Marcus wasn't listening. He was watching his daughters, who looked at him like he hung the moon. And in that moment, he knew he'd made the right choice. Every difficult decision, every legal battle, every sacrifice of privacy and peace. This was what Sarah would have wanted. This was what Vincent's fortune was meant for. This was what healing looked like. The years that followed were quieter. Marcus never stopped working, but the work changed. Instead of fixing toilets and patching roofs, he managed foundations, oversaw construction projects, met with non-profit leaders, traveled occasionally for conferences on philanthropy and addiction treatment, became someone people sought out for advice on using wealth meaningfully, but he never forgot where he came from. Still drove his old truck, though he could afford any car made. Still wore jeans and flannel. Still cut his own grass and fixed his own sink when it leaked. The only real luxury he allowed himself was time. Time with Emma and Lily. Time to coach their soccer teams. Time to help with homework. Time to just sit on the porch and watch them play. Lily grew into a serious teenager, all sharp questions and fierce protectiveness of her sister. Decided at 14 she wanted to be a therapist. Started volunteering at the Holloway Center, talking to residents, learning about trauma and healing. Marcus watched her become the kind of person Sarah would have been proud of. One evening when Lily was 16, she came home from the center with red eyes. Marcus found her in her room, staring at the wall. "What happened?" he asked gently. "One of the residents relapsed. Carl. The guy who's been there 8 months. He was doing so well, and then today he just walked out, left a note saying he couldn't do it anymore." Marcus sat beside her on the bed. "That happens sometimes. Addiction is complicated. Recovery isn't a straight line. But we failed him. No, the disease won, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. Carl knows where we are if he wants to come back. The door is always open." Lily wiped her eyes. "How do you keep doing this, knowing that some people you can't save?" "Because the ones you can save are worth it, and because giving up isn't an option. Your mom taught me that. She fought until the very end, even when we knew she wouldn't win. She fought because the fight itself mattered." Lily leaned against his shoulder. "I miss her." "Me too, baby, every single day." Emma was softer, artistic, spent hours drawing and painting, decorated her room with landscapes and portraits, asked Marcus once if she could paint his portrait for the center's main lobby. He said only if she painted it honestly. So she did, showed him in his work clothes, crowbar in hand, standing in front of the lodge, called it "The Man Who Opened the Door." It hung in the center's entrance for the next decade. Rachel became more than a sister-in-law, became Marcus's partner in everything, managed the scholarship fund, sat on the center's board, helped him navigate the complicated world he'd been thrust into. Never asked for anything except the chance to help. Marcus put her on salary, made her a director, gave her a seat at every table, because family wasn't just blood, it was showing up. Derek ran the center for 7 years before retiring. Trained his replacement, a woman named Christine who'd been through addiction herself, who understood what the residents needed because she'd needed it once too. Derek moved into a cabin on the property, spent his final years walking the grounds, talking to residents, sharing his uncle's story. Died peacefully at 73, surrounded by people who called him family. They buried him on the property, under a pine tree near the garden. The headstone read, "Derek Holloway, Guardian of Secrets, Builder of Hope." The day of his funeral, every resident and staff member came, placed flowers on the grave, shared stories. Marcus stood with his daughters, now young women in their 20s, and remembered the man who'd walked into his lodge and handed him a photograph, who'd trusted him with a legacy, who'd believed he was the right person. "Thank you," Marcus whispered to the headstone, "for everything." Emma knelt and placed a small painting against the stone, a portrait of Derek, smiling, standing in front of the center. Underneath, she'd written, "Some people guard treasure, the best ones create it." The Holloway Center expanded over the years, added a youth wing for teenagers struggling with mental health, built a trauma recovery program for veterans, partnered with tribal nations to provide culturally sensitive treatment. By its 20th anniversary, it had helped over 9,000 people, and every single one of them left knowing that someone had believed they were worth saving. The Sarah Reed Memorial Scholarship Fund sent 2,000 students to college. Doctors, teachers, engineers, artists, social workers. People who'd lost parents but not hope. People who proved that tragedy didn't have to be destiny. Every year, Marcus hosted a dinner for the scholarship recipients, heard their stories, learned about their lives, watched them become the people Sarah would have loved to meet. One young woman, the first in her family to attend college, graduated with a degree in oncology research. Told Marcus she was dedicating her career to fighting the disease that had taken his wife. He cried in front of 50 people and didn't care. And Marcus, he lived simply, kept the same house, drove the same truck until it finally died at 300,000 miles, then bought a used replacement, invested carefully, gave generously, showed his daughters that wealth was responsibility, not freedom, that the more you had, the more you owed. "Why don't we live in a mansion?" Lily asked him once when she was 17. "Because we don't need one," Marcus said simply. "We have everything that matters right here." "But we could," Emma pointed out. "We could have anything." "Could doesn't mean should," he replied. "Your mom and I used to dream about having enough, never about having everything, and I don't want to lose sight of that." On the 20th anniversary of finding the vault, Marcus returned to the underground chamber for the first time in years. The steel door was now properly maintained. The vault itself had been transformed into an archive. Vincent's journal. Marcus's photographs from that first discovery. Newspaper articles, legal documents, all preserved and displayed so visitors to the center could understand the story. Marcus walked through it slowly, past the spots where gold bars had been stacked, past the empty racks that once held paintings, past the desk where Vincent had written his final letter. Everything was gone now, sold or donated or transferred. Nothing remained except the story. He stopped at a glass case in the center of the room. Inside, Vincent's letter, the original, preserved forever. Marcus read it again for the 1,000th time. "Use this money. Build something, help people, create a legacy that isn't just metal and canvas stored underground. Prove that wealth can be a tool for good instead of a cage." Marcus smiled. "We did it, Vincent. We proved it." Beside Vincent's letter was something new, a second frame. Inside, a letter Marcus had written on the 10th anniversary of the center, addressed to future finders of fortunes, future desperate souls who might stumble into wealth. It read, "Wealth will not fix you. It will not erase grief. It will not make you happy. But if you let it, if you're brave enough, it can give you the tools to build something that matters. Don't hide it. Don't hoard it. Don't let it turn you into someone your family wouldn't recognize. Use it. Share it. Prove that desperation can lead to purpose, and that sometimes the greatest treasure isn't what you find, but what you choose to create with it. The world is watching. Show them it's possible to be wealthy and good." Marcus Reed. He climbed the stairs, sealed the door behind him, and walked into the sunlight. The lodge stood solid and proud. Gardens bloomed. Residents worked in the greenhouse. Staff laughed on the porch. This place, once a tomb for one man's fear, had become a sanctuary for thousands. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Lily. "Don't forget dinner tonight. Emma's bringing her girlfriend. Rachel's making pot roast. Be there at 6 or she'll kill you." He smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." The drive home took 90 minutes, same as always. But Marcus didn't mind. Used the time to think, to remember, to appreciate how far he'd come from that desperate morning when he'd called about an auction, betting his last $8,500 on a property everyone else had given up on. He thought about Sarah, wondered what she'd say if she could see their daughters now. Lily in graduate school for clinical psychology, writing her thesis on intergenerational trauma and recovery. Emma, running an art therapy program at a children's hospital, using creativity to help kids process grief and loss. Both of them strong, compassionate, aware of their privilege but not defined by it. He thought about Vincent, a man who'd earned a fortune but died broken, who'd left a warning that saved Marcus from making the same mistakes, who'd trusted that eventually someone would find his hidden wealth and use it better than he had. And he thought about himself, the handyman who'd become a philanthropist, the single father who'd become a guardian of someone else's legacy, the man who'd opened a steel door and found not just wealth, but purpose. Marcus pulled into his driveway. The tire swings swayed gently in the evening breeze. Lights glowed warm in the windows. Through the front window he could see Rachel setting the table, Emma laughing at something on her phone, Lily organizing something obsessively, probably color-coding place settings because that's who she was. His family, his home, his life. He sat in the truck for a moment, engine off, just breathing. Grateful. So impossibly grateful. Not for the money, though it had given them security. Not for the attention, which he still mostly avoided. Not even for the center, though he was proud of it. Grateful for the chance. The opportunity to prove that regular people, broken people, desperate people, could handle wealth without losing themselves. Could use fortune to heal instead of harm. Could build legacies that mattered. Vincent Holloway had accumulated $275 million and died alone. Marcus Reed had inherited $193 million and built a family, a community, a mission. The difference wasn't the money. It was the courage to step into the light instead of hiding in the dark. Marcus got out of the truck and walked to his front door. Inside, his daughters were arguing about something trivial. Rachel was stirring gravy. The house smelled like home. He stepped inside. "I'm here." Lily looked up. "Finally, Emma was about to eat your portion." "Was not," Emma protested. "Was too." Marcus smiled and joined them at the table. His family, his girls, his sister, his life. And somewhere deep in the mountains, beneath a lodge that now saved lives instead of storing secrets, an empty vault stood as proof that anyone can change the world if they're stubborn enough to open doors others walk away from. Anyone can find treasure if they're willing to look beneath the surface where others see only decay. As evening settled over Montana, Marcus Reed sat at his dining room table, surrounded by love and laughter. No longer the desperate single father who'd paid $8,500 for 40 acres of ruins. He'd become something else entirely. Not a millionaire, though he was one. Not a philanthropist, though he'd given away millions. But something simpler and infinitely more valuable. He'd become the man who proved Vincent Holloway had been wrong about one thing. Wealth didn't have to be a burden. Fear didn't have to win. And sometimes the greatest fortune wasn't what you found buried underground. It was what you built in the light. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful true stories are waiting for you. Click to keep discovering hope, transformation, and the courage to open doors others fear. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that anyone, anywhere can turn desperation into destiny when they're brave enough to dig.